That was beautiful. Thank you. It was a great arrangement. I love the accompaniment too, and I love your singing. That was Mark Hayes, right? Yeah, he's a member of my church in Kansas years ago. Yeah, he did the arrangement on that. Prelude too, right? I'll tell you. It's old home day here. So we're going to talk about forgiveness. And that's always an interesting process, because forgiveness is something that is an ongoing life's work. We came into this lifetime to do forgiveness work. This part of ourselves that seems to be walled off, that heart of us. I came into this lifetime and intuited that I really had some issues around my heart. And so much of what I've experienced in my life has been to release and let go of the walls around my heart. I release and let go the walls around my heart. Together? I release and let go the walls around my heart. And as we melt the walls around our heart with the gentle rain, and sometimes not so gentle rain of forgiveness, what happens is that we open up a greater capacity for love. And a greater capacity for love is a greater capacity for healing and prosperity and harmony in relationships and anything good, spiritual awakening. It's the life's work. And I had somebody once say to me, well, can't I just do the forgiveness work once and be done with it? And I said, it's like flossing. Do you say, well, I did it last week. I didn't. They told me I had to floss. And when I was in my late 20s, I hadn't done it because, I'd done it once. What good's that? They told me I was going to lose them if I didn't start doing it. So I realized I needed to do this work every day. And in this book that we're studying, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, Edwene Gaines talks about an ongoing process of forgiveness that we can move tremendous energy in our lives, but there's always going to be something. Somebody's always not going to live up to your expectations, and as she says, many of them drive automobiles. There's always going to be something at the end of the day for you to let go of, and that's not a detriment. That's actually a life's work, and it's a joy because it's part of opening up our hearts. So, forgiveness. I was told when I was growing up that we should forgive. It's a good idea, right? But I didn't really know how to do it, and here I was out in the ministry, and I didn't realize that forgiveness had 2 parts. The first part is the intention. You set an intention to forgive. That was the only thing I knew how to do. So I would put white light around the person, and put white light around the person, and put white light around the person, and then it would just keep popping up, and I couldn't figure out why. And what came to me was a picture of a cat box. And I was taking lace doilies and putting them on top of the cat box, covering it up. No problem, right? Except for it didn't get rid of the smell, which got worse with age. I have to do what? I have to go in and clean it out. And so my cat box analogy, I think, is apt for this. It's important for us to do this work. And before I knew some of the methods and techniques I'm going to share with you on how to forgive, I just kind of muddled through. And my most dramatic story of muddling through was with Edwene Gaines. This was almost 40 years ago. I was the president of the Southwest Unity region, and because I was president, I invited my friend Edwene to come and be the keynote speaker at our regional conference in Palm Springs. And it was a wonderful time, but there was some time off one afternoon. I said, hey, Edwene, you want to go with me to my woo-woo spot? Now, Edwene was all, yeah, I'm in. She didn't know what it was. It was a place called Joshua Tree National Park. Anybody know about Joshua Tree National Park? If you've been there, there's energy there. There's power there. It's a vibration. I could tell you a lot of woo-woo stories because that was my go-to place if I was in a crisis or I was going through something in my life or I wanted renewal or refreshment. So I took Edwene to my favorite spot in Joshua Tree, and it was a place called Hidden Valley. It was called Hidden Valley even though it was a flat place. There was no valley there, but these gigantic boulders that are out there in Joshua Tree formed a circle the size of a football stadium. And on the inside, there was nothing. It was the natural formation, but it was the most uncanny thing. And they called it Hidden Valley because there's only one way in, which now is marked with trails. But in those days, in the late 1800s, when they first found Hidden Valley, there was really no way to to find your way in. And the rustlers learned about it, and that's where they took all the purloined, stolen cattle, and they would lead them through this little trail through these rocks into this great big open space, and they called it Hidden Valley. And they used this thing apparently for 20 years, and they didn't get caught. Well, anyway, there's a trail. We walked through all the boulders. We went and we sat down under a great big boulder. And of course, the Joshua trees were there with their arms like this, and the energy was so strong. And we did some meditation, and I thought it was going to be, your typical meditation. It was wonderful to share that time with Edwene. The entire meditation, a resentment kept coming into my mind. I kept thinking about a person who had done something that had caused a mental health trigger, a serious break in a friend of mine, that had really affected my life negatively, and I felt such resentment, almost a sense of rage as I was sitting there. I wasn't meditating at all. I was ruminating. There's an old country song that just pops into my mind. You ever hear it? Digging up bones, exhuming things that's best left all alone. I'm just sitting at home digging up bones. I was digging up bones, and I didn't seem to have any control over my mind at all. And furthermore, at the end of the time of our meditation, it came to me, you've got to tell Edwene about this. Well, I didn't think that this was, a good thing to do. I mean, I'd be just spreading my anger or my resentment with somebody, but it was overwhelming. So I said, Edwene, I know this just doesn't make any sense, and I know I probably shouldn't do it, but I just can't stop myself. I've got to tell you about this resentment that keeps coming up during the meditation. I told her all about the story and all the things that this person had done that caused the hurt to my friend and my own experience, and her eyes got very, very compassionate. She looked at me and she said, Greg, do you know why you told me that story? I said, no, I don't. Because I spent all of last week with that person and I just flew from their house. I barely knew that they knew each other. And so I said, well, I guess then there's a reason why I told you. She says, yes, this person, I think, needs to hear this, and I just get the strongest feeling you need to call them. Well, I didn't trust this person. I didn't feel like I should call them. And I'm going to stop right here. When you forgive somebody, 99.9% of the time, don't call them. That's just you laying your stuff on them. This is an exception. I didn't know how to do the methods that I can tell you now, so this was really the universe, God's way of helping me. So we drove back. The conference was great. I went back home, and with trepidation, I called this person. Edwene gave me the phone number, and you probably think that the end of the story is this person said, oh, let's make amends, let's be friends, everything's good, I'm sorry for what I did. No. This person denied that it ever happened. And furthermore, had the audacity to say to me, Greg, there's somebody in your life that you need to make amends with. You hurt this person when you did thus and such. Now, I had a choice in that moment. And I realized in making my choice that I had no idea that I'd hurt this person. It was an unconscious thing that I'd done. Remember when Jesus was on the cross and he said, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. He was really saying, Father, forgive them because they're unconscious. Most of the actions that people do to hurt each other are unconscious. I didn't even know I'd done something to hurt this person, but there it was, and she was right. So I thanked her and got off the phone, and she said, you need to call this person. So I called this person, and I made amends with them. You see, forgiveness is not about you. It's not about trying to get them to change or get them to see anything. Forgiveness is not about them, it's about you. Let me get that straight. Forgiveness is not about them, it's about you. And so I called this person, this other person on the phone, and I shared the thing, and it was a wonderful healing experience for me. And not only did that lift from my heart, but the other resentment lifted from my heart. I realized I didn't need to get this person to acknowledge anything. And the 2 or 3 times in the future that I ran into this person, it was very cordial and fine. And no, I was not going to consider being close friends, but I didn't have a resentment. I didn't carry it around. And sometimes forgiveness is like Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day's on Saturday. And a year ago, my son and I drove to the town where they filmed Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It wasn't Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. It's Woodstock, Illinois. because it's such a picturesque, beautiful town. We didn't do a lot of sightseeing because it was 15 below, and my transmission kept seizing up. But still, we had a wonderful time there anyway. We couldn't stay in the same bed and breakfast that Bill and Murray stayed in because all their pipes burst. But we stayed in a nice motel, and we had a nice time staying indoors. But I've really thought about that Groundhog Day experience as a metaphor for forgiveness. It repeats itself over and over and over again, and you notice with each time he's moving closer and closer to the goal, and then when he finally gets the lesson, when it kicks in, then it was better. Then he was able to let it go. And so being willing to let go of those situations in your life may well allow you to have more energy. After I did that work of calling that person and then calling the other person and doing my forgiveness work of myself and then forgiving that person, I found my life took off. My life just took off. I mean, I can't tell you the changes that happened in my life because I've been holding that resentment for some time. I had a similar situation a few years later. I'd gone through a situation where somebody who was fairly well known had said some things and led some things that weren't true, and I'd carried some resentment with me, and I put white light around him and put white light around him, and I still didn't know the methods of forgiveness that I'm going to share with you today, and I'm going to share on Tuesday night. So I was just kind of doing that white light thing, which is okay, but there's two parts to forgiveness. Setting the intention, that's the white light part, and then the process, and you got to process it to complete it. Well, I didn't know that. I was sitting and ruminating and digging up bones in my condo about 3 years after this thing had happened. And I just felt really resentful, and I just wanted to distract myself. So I turned on CNN. I figured I'm just going to watch the news. Immediately, it was the top of the hour. There was a half-hour special on this person, on what a great humanitarian and wonderful all-around good person this was. And I'm going, I know this person. They're not like that at all. And of course, they were like that, but they also did whatever they did with me. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew that there was no accident. What are the odds that in the moment that I'd prayed a prayer, help me, and then just turned on the TV because I didn't know what to do. So I pulled out pen and paper and I wrote down all my nasty feelings, and I took it out to my patio and I burned it. And I felt lighter, and I did my forgiveness work. I didn't understand how to do it, but writing things down, putting it down on paper, is such a powerful and healing way of doing the forgiveness work. And I want to share with you a method on Tuesday night especially, but you can begin the process today and do this at home. It's called Journaling Ideas for the 7 Steps by Jane Elizabeth Hart. It's back there in the lobby in the narthex on the table. Just pick it up and journal out the answers to the questions of the 7 steps. And I've shared before how Jane Elizabeth Hart, this came to her as a grieving process when her mother died. But it also helped her with her father after her mother died, when her father came up to her 6 months later and introduced her to this wonderful woman and said, I'd like you to meet this wonderful woman in my life. And Jane was not happy at all. Here was somebody that would take her father away from her, that was a rival, and also, who does he think he is, having anyone other than my deceased mother in his life, and all these kinds of things. And she realized that if she wanted to, she could really sabotage that relationship real good, because she had her father's buttons all picked out. And then she realized she did not want to do that. So she used the 7 steps, journaled it out, did the meditation, and forgave her father, forgave the woman for existing, and forgave herself. And when her father and the woman got married about 3 months later, she walked her father down the aisle. And not only that woman, that stepmother, became one of her closest friends, and they continued to be friends. Her father only lived for another couple years, but they were happy 2 years. She was happy for him, and after that, she and her stepmother were very, very close. So this is born of experience. I have used this 7-step method probably 5,000 times. I'm not exaggerating, because I've been doing it for over 20 years now. And it is one of the most powerful experiences that I've ever had. Whenever I have something, a stuck place in my heart or something, this is what I use. So what you could do, this is what I'd suggest. Go get this sheet. It's out there in the lobby, in the narthex. Do the journaling on something that you want to release, and then bring it, or don't bring the journaling, but bring this to the class on Tuesday night, because what we're going to do is some deeper journaling on Tuesday night. It's not going to be a lecture class. It'll be a processing class, and then I'm going to lead you in a meditation to get that energy up and out and released and moved on. But before I had methods like this, I had to rely on just synchronicity and intuition. One time I had a man who had, again, done some things that I had resented, and I was at a conference, and I shared the story about Robert Schuller invited a bunch of ministers to a conference in his beautiful private gardens on Maui, and it was wonderful, and it was great, but I wasn't enjoying it because I was resenting this guy. So I sat down on one of the benches there in the garden, and I prayed, God, help me to forgive this man. And I opened my eyes, and there he was. He didn't even live there. I didn't even know he'd been invited to this conference, and he was walking, but his back was to me. So I did the thing that any loving spiritual person would do. I got up and got the heck out of there as far as I could, went to the farthest part of the garden that I could to hide from this guy. So I went down and I prayed again, God, help me with my resentment. I opened my eyes. This time he's walked all the way to where I am, walking right towards me, smiling and waving. And so we sat down and we talked things out, and it was a very beautiful thing. And again, I didn't lay a lot of resentment on him, but I shared with him what was on my heart. And he didn't acknowledge anything, but you know what? It's not for them, it's for you. And my heart lightened up, and it's a powerful experience in my life. It even can make a big difference in your prosperity life, tangibly. I was in a situation once when I was an associate minister, and I was required to give 3 months' notice if I was going to seek placement, and I was going to seek placement, and this was where I ended up being placed. But there was a long process to this, and during that period of time, they brought in, during my 3-month notice, a couple who was willing to work for 2 people for the price of me. And they liked that very much, so they said, that's it, you can leave now, and we're going to bring them in. And I was so resentful, it was so unfair. Furthermore, it was against state law. You can't do that after making an agreement like that, blah, 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 blah. I took it into prayer, and what came to me was a picture of myself on a carousel. You know the old-fashioned carousels where there's a brass ring before the risk managers got rid of that? And I was reaching for the brass ring, but there was a commotion behind me, and I turned around and I missed the brass ring. This was the brass ring. But if I got myself into the commotion and distracted in my resentment, I wouldn't have been clear to come here. I would have been involved or entangled in that. So I just let it go. And not only did I end up coming here, but something interesting, during that period of time, the 6 or 8 weeks that I didn't have any employment or any income, I had the time to do an audio series that ended up making me 3 times the money I would have gotten salary. And so it works out for you if you're willing to follow your guidance, do the work. Jesus said, agree with thine adversaries quickly. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that you have to take care of in the world, but you handle things with as little entanglement as possible, as much love and forgiveness as possible. The question I'm asking you is, where in your life can you let go of something? Where in your life is there old, as Jane Hart calls it, old rancid memories that you need to let go of, that you need to release? And perhaps reframe the story of that situation. Now, this is a very challenging thing, but she talks about how she was abused as a child and was telling her mentor about it, and her mentor said, look, it's time for you to reframe the story. And he said, try this one on for size. You are a woman of power, and this is a situation that you suffered in your life so that you would see what happens when somebody abuses power so that you would never do that. and that you would be able to reach out in compassion to other people. And she tried that on for size after letting go of her resentment of him not listening to her story. And she found herself entirely shifting the way she looked at her whole childhood. My old mentor, Dr. Mary Allen, the psychiatrist in California who wrote Explorer's Odyssey, the book we have in the bookstore, she called that the good intentions process. She said that with 20% of her psychiatric patients, only 20% were ready for it, but I dare say more than 20% in this room were advanced enough to do it. She said, I had them close their eyes and ask, for what good intention did my soul create this transaction in my life? And then let it rise and see. It's a very challenging thing. Not everybody's ready to do that. But when they are, they can move in a very powerful level. Joan Borisenko. How many people heard of Joan Borisenko? The great spiritual teacher who was the psychiatrist who was the head of the Harvard University, Harvard Medical School Holistic Health Department. She had a process in her life, an experience in her life, where she asked that question. Her mother had disapproved of her her entire life. Her mother's idea of success for her was that she would marry a doctor. Not that she would become a doctor. Her becoming a doctor was a failure, and her mother reminded her of that time and time again. That's just weird. What are you doing that? And she felt like her mother had opposed her every step of the way. And when she did her deep work and asked this question, what came to her was that her mother, pushing against her, caused her to build the muscles, the inner strength to become her own person. And that it was an agreement that she and her mother made before she was even born. That's what she believed, and that's what came to her intuitively. Whether that fits you or suits you, I don't know. But the truth is that when we go through these difficult situations, it is possible to frame them in a new way. But we've got to do the forgiveness work. Gandhi is a good example of this. When he was in South Africa, the entire nonviolent resistance and the great teachings that came through him to create the independence of India and all the great teachings that he did happened because he was unjustly thrown off of a train for a white passenger. And he was so resentful, but when he did his spiritual work, he started having dreams, and in the dreams he was shown nonviolent resistance. And when he tried to implement it in South Africa, it didn't work, so then he moved back to India, and there it did work. So this was to serve a higher purpose. Do you remember in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, where Joshua's brothers betrayed him, and he said to them when he was confronted with them again, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And that's reframing things in a new way. And this is a powerful lesson that if we're ready for it, we can move with it. But for us, forgiveness is a life's work. It releases the walls to our hearts. It opens up for a greater capacity, opens us up to a greater capacity for joy and for spiritual awakening and for abundance, for healing in every area of your life. But you may find that situations in your life repeat themselves, much like Groundhog Day, over and over until you're willing to do this work. I'll share another story, and I'm telling on myself. Back, many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, when I was going through a period of time, I found myself over and over again dating women, and then when I started to get serious about them, they'd light up a cigarette because they'd been hiding the smoking from me. And I would get really angry, like really, really angry, which, I can understand not liking it or whatever, but it didn't fit the situation. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, I thought, I put white light around it. I did whatever I could do. What happened was, finally, it happened again. And here I am, and this woman lights up a cigarette, and I go, oh boy. So I went ahead and got out of the relationship and started working on myself. And what I did was I asked the question, what is going on here? And what I saw was a picture of a Pell-Mell cigarette package in the back of the kitchen cupboard when I was growing up, when I was about 6 years old. See, my mom had quit smoking, so she told us, but she was hiding her cigarettes. And my parents were very honest people. Whatever problems there were in my childhood, being truthful wasn't part of it. But this was the first time that I ever experienced my parents ever lying to me. Here she was, and I had blocked it in my mind. I had no idea about it. So I forgave my mom for having done that. And she ended up quitting smoking after that. I think that when I found those cigarettes, that took care of it. But that unconscious trauma in that little boy, I let it go, and it never happened again. So in your life, you will find yourself freeing up energy, having better financial outcomes. You'll find yourself moving your energy in such a way that you don't repeat the same patterns over and over again. And hopefully, if you can come on Tuesday night, I'll lead you through a meditation and a journaling exercise to take whatever you're working with today and move it deeper. And I also encourage you to take the meditation exercise of the sanctuary of forgiveness and do some work with it. Now I'm going to do another visualization exercise from Edwene's book that can help move some energy for you. And in this, she has a blank, and you're supposed to fill in the blank. And I'm going to ask you to do this in your mind and your heart. So just close your eyes and open your heart. And just move yourself into that sanctuary of forgiveness again. Perhaps you need to open the door again and walk to that special bench or seat for you and feel yourself immersed with all your senses, all your inner senses of sight, hearing, smell, sound, of nature there in this place. And dwelling in your sanctuary of forgiveness. Take these